studies show that college students are more alone, more isolated. They're hurting alone, and they're just staying in their rooms. What are you seeing?
I think we see a lot of that. I think a lot of it's tied to, technology in general, cell phones, Xbox, PlayStation. I heard it said once, like we have more ability to be connected, but we're more distant than we've ever been. You have every ounce of connection you could ever ask for right at your fingertips.
The potential of it, at least.
Yeah, at least the potential of it, but it's way reduced the interpersonal relationship that you can't ever fully replicate that through a screen. In the same way that like us sitting down today you can't fully ever do that on a Zoom call or on a phone call or through a headset,
group chat or whatever.
Yeah. So I think we see it a lot. I think loneliness, friendship, really what I was going to come in thinking of, like one of the biggest hurdles that I think we see for students today is just community or lack thereof, just having a lack of people. And because I don't know, I think society's kind of shifting in the sense that society will tell you can kind of do, lone wolf, you can kind of do your own thing, be you. You don't need people. And that's just not true. I mean, people can't survive and thrive and be healthy without people, without interaction. And so, I think that's just like a lie that we're seeing a lot of students, kind of, step into and just kind of keep people at arm's reach, and obviously that's going to start to, in the short term might be, feasible for a little while, but it's going to start to rear its ugly head after a year, 2 years, 3 years, when it's like, oh man, I don't really have any connection with anyone. So yeah, I think we definitely see that on campus, and I'm sure it's represented in people that we're not able to connect to as well. Of just, it's harder and harder to connect with people now, I think, and students, especially as we're trying to do outreach and things, because there is that barrier of, people don't just go wander around campus as much like they used to. It's a lot of in your rooms or just kind of laying low. And it's gotten better, I think, since COVID, but for sure during COVID, I mean, it was like, it was a ghost town on campus, and it's getting better now. Yeah. But yeah, we still see it for sure.
I was struck by, it was just last fall. I had for a bunch of years the groove of, at the start of the school year, kind of the kickoff week at most of the campuses here in Fargo, I would go to at least one or two of the campuses, MSUM, Concordia, and DSU, and prayer walk around the campus. And then I didn't do it in 2020 and didn't do it in 2021. I don't remember why, but then I think I did in 22. But then last year, I went and did that at Concordia's campus. And for whatever reason, it really jumped out at me that the stark difference of, like, man, when I was in college, you'd have, lots of groups of students walking around, hanging out, doing stuff. And then every once in a while, there'd be someone walking around with headphones on, listening to music. Usually they were like a music major or something like that. And last fall, when I was walking around the Concordia campus, I was really struck by, like, one, how few students were walking around. Yeah. And this was a Friday night on like kickoff week. So typically there's all sorts of stuff going on. And the students that were walking around, I'd say, I didn't like do an exact count, but it was probably 80+% of them were walking around by themselves with headphones in. And then 20% or so were walking around in groups of 3, 4, 5. I was like, man, that creates such a different experience if the default is isolation, headphones in, versus the doing things with a group of people.
I blame the AirPods. That's what I blame.
Seriously, that's what you see. At least they got one AirPod out usually, so you can still talk to them. But
you can talk to half of me.
You can talk to half of them. Yeah.
You can't approach someone, when they have their AirPods on, or when they are. You could, but that you feel bad when they take their headphones off and they're like, "What can I help you?" Yeah. But that's so the norm now for all of us. That's the norm of for most college students. That's sad that you see that too. But why is it, do you guys think? Is it fear? Is it perception of like, hey, I don't think this person's going to like me? We've looked at the liking gap multiple times, So is it like we're not as outgoing. We're not willing to have conversations with people, with strangers. But we're going to walk by them for 4 years in a row and never say a word. That's normal. Why is that?
I think there's probably a lot of different reasons. I mean, I think one for sure is we're as a society, we're just getting less and less comfortable having like a conversation like this.
Yeah.
You know, like even I find myself like, you know, I'll maybe try to like avoid a phone call so I can text, right? Or I'll like, you know, like it's simpler, it's easier. And so I think there's a little bit of that comes in I just think as people do it less and less, there's just even outgoing people are less and less likely to want to talk to people. I think another big one is kind of, we're in like a very like efficiency minded society now where it's like, I fall victim to it too. I mean, I've got my days almost like perfectly mapped out from start to finish every day. And so, I mean, you think about that, you have no margin in your life. Without any margin, when are you ever going to have the time to connect with people? And so that's something I've had to force myself to do, is actually leave a half hour in between meetings so that if someone was sitting in the union, I could go and talk to them, or I could stop and have a random conversation, or do anything other than, going somewhere on a mission to do something, you know? And so I think even that too is like, I mean, you think about class, it's like if you play video games up until 5 minutes before class, well, then you just got to bolt to class. You don't have any margin. You've got, something scheduled right after class. Well, now you're bolting out of class again. And so I think some of it is that we just live in this like hyper efficiency society that is, you add technology in there and it's like, oh my gosh, like if you're not intentional to create margin, like there will be no margin in your life. Like you have to fight for it. It's not just going to happen. So I would say those are probably some of the biggest things, at least to me, but
yeah, I think, and underneath that, there's kind of I would say some core beliefs that people are taking on, consciously or not, about what does it mean to be human. They're like the idea that, my identity is defined by that performance, my success, and then my identity, or like that I should never feel, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, that like, if I feel uncomfortable, I must be doing something wrong, I think is another like belief that's out there. So like if what does a cell phone do? What does having headphones in do? It prevents you from being uncomfortable. Even on my drive over here, I was running from thing to thing, and then had lunch and was driving over here. Had some challenging stuff happen earlier this week. Nothing major for me, but some people I'm close to have had some pretty difficult situations going on. And I was tempted to I actually pulled out headphones to put in to continue to listen to a podcast I was listening to earlier, and just felt like the Holy Spirit was like, no, like enough input, like take that 5-minute drive or 7-minute drive or whatever it is, and just like exist. And you're going to have to wrestle with some of the emotions that come with not being distracted from what you're feeling. So I think those are two pretty significant, like fundamental beliefs that consciously or not, people are taking on, and which makes it make sense to, I'm not going to get connected with people. I'm not going to, if it's bad when I feel uncomfortable, then I'm going to avoid relationships and making new friends, because that's always awkward at the beginning, almost every time.
Yeah.
Thoughts is, sometimes our thoughts are scary, or sometimes we can't just sit and be still. Especially for me, like I had to learn how to be still, but we are afraid of our thoughts, and we let our thoughts sometimes guide our life. Our feelings are the things that, all right, that becomes the fact in my life. It's like, but no, like it starts with knowing again whose you are. It starts with understanding why, what's the purpose of just living this life, for you, Bryce, man, you're one of the friends in my life that I just saw just 360, why college ministry? Why, what did the Lord do? Like tell people about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, a lot of the reason, Morgan and I always say this, a lot of the reason why we were so excited to do what we do is because it's the vehicle that the Lord used to bring us to himself. And, I went to college completely, planning to just get through with as good of grades as I could, as best working experience as I could, to position myself to be successful.
Yeah,
that was
win at life.
Yeah, that was all I really wanted. I just wanted a good career. I wanted to make a lot of money. I wanted to, for me personally, it was be able to hunt all the time. That was just what I wanted to do. I wanted to buy farms. That was my motivation. And my freshman year, I had, it was kind of up and down, but I had a lot of what I thought I wanted. But I got to that summer after, and I was like, man, I'm just not fulfilled. Like, I don't think that this is the whole piece of the pie. Like, I don't think this is the whole story. And so, I mean, I grew up in church, and I grew up going to private school. And so, the Lord wasn't a foreign concept to me. A relationship with Jesus wasn't a foreign concept to me. It just was never something that I had really engaged with on my own. And so I got back to campus that fall. I was like, maybe I'll give God a shot. Kind of like sarcastically, honestly.
Like, I'll test this out and it's not going to work. And then I'll go back to...
it's like the last option. I've tried all the things that I was pretty sure were going to work. So like, there's no way this one will either, kind of thing. And then just encountered a community of people who genuinely love the Lord and encountered the Holy Spirit and worship and prayer and through a message. And I was like, wow, like there is more here than I thought there was. This is real. I just had been masking really myself. I just was not looking. And just my heart was closed. My heart was closed off to what God would want to do. And so really, I mean, from there on, I mean, obviously it wasn't, sunshine and rainbows from there, but, encountered the Lord in a real way, gave my heart back to him, and just began to let that be the filter that I ran my whole life through, what would God want me to do? Because I realized, like, man, I came to college on my own volition. I decided what I wanted to do with my life on my own volition. I made every decision up to that point in my life based on what I wanted to do. Which, isn't always wrong, but is also not always right. And so, just started really trying to run things through, the lens of, okay, what does God want me to do? And it was really through that I began to realize that business, although it was a passion that I had and was a good thing that I was enjoying, and what Jimmy and I were able to do was really fun, and I had a blast doing it, but I just began to realize, like, that was like my dream for my life. That was my vision for my life, not God's vision for my life. And as I began to realize that, it wasn't easy. I kind of wrestled because I was like, I don't know if I kind of want to keep doing this. I kind of like this stuff, but the Lord just was really steady and consistent with me through kind of my junior and senior year of like, no, this is what I have next for you. And so honestly, just kind of took not a blind leap. I mean, I had been a part of Chi Alpha and was going to intern with Chi Alpha. And so it wasn't like I was jumping into a whole new world. But jumping out of the business world into ministry was
it's a big
pretty big jump. And it was really just one of those things that I didn't have the whole picture of where I was going to be or where I was going to go or what I was going to be doing. I would have never thought I'd even be doing what I'm doing today. And that decision was still only, 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, time things can change so quickly. But the Lord just continuously confirmed, what he was calling us to, my wife Morgan and I, as we got married, just continued to confirm, what it was and open new doors that we would have never been able to see when we stepped through the first door. But as we were just obedient to, continue to step through the doors that the Lord had put before us and opened for us, it all kind of fell into place. And now it makes so much sense. The hindsight is really crystal clear with the Lord a lot of times. But in the moment, there was a lot of times where I was like, oh man, like,
is this the right move?
Is this right? Like, what's going on? Like, this doesn't make sense on paper. This doesn't make sense maybe financially or relationally, or, there was just things where I was like, man, this just doesn't always make sense. But that's a lot of what following Jesus is. I mean, that's a lot of what faith is it's not always doing the common sense thing. It's not always doing, what makes sense to me or what maybe, advances my career or advances my wants, my needs. When you take the attention off yourself and put it back on the Lord, it's amazing. Kind of the world can kind of open up to, wow, God's way is really better than my way. And doing my own thing without the Lord would not be, no matter what it is, would not be as fulfilling as doing God's thing with him. And so that's I'm curious. You mentioned, early on the kind of 3 things of like, okay, finding this community of people that are passionate about Jesus, experiencing God, hearing the word preached kind of as a sort of group of things that impacted you significantly. Tease that apart. Was there like an order that happened? What
what drew you in to Chi Alpha?
That's good.
Did someone say something? Hey, you should come check this thing out, or like what happened?
Or like you showed up at a Chi Alpha event and heard a sermon, and that was like,
wow.
What did that look like?
Yeah. So I didn't actually really have any connection to anyone that was in Chi Alpha. I had a couple people, tell me about it, and actually,
so you were aware of it.
I was aware of it. My mom actually she tagged me in one of their Facebook posts.
Classic
like the year
mom
before,
move,
my freshman year. I didn't go till my sophomore year. So anyway, we laugh about that sometimes. But I didn't really know anyone, but I kind of sort of recognized the guy at the connection table. So I was like, you know what? I'll just give it a shot. So I snuck into service, didn't really know anyone. And it was like, right when worship started, there was just this like, because I was not a stranger to church. Like I grew up in church. I went to church every weekend. Like I knew what it was like to go to a service, but I had never experienced worship like that. And that was probably the first telltale sign where I was like, okay,
something's different here.
Here. And I also just felt like incredibly out of place the whole night. I was like, oh, I'm gonna like burn up in here. These people are all so holy. Like these people are all so amazing, and they are. Yeah. But I just felt like this. It was like the Lord was drawing me to himself through like, this is what you can have. And the enemy was like, you don't belong here. This is like, these people are too good, whatever. Yeah. And so it was, I think the worship, and then the message was just really powerful. It was on the prodigal son, was about as good of a message I could have possibly heard coming back to like really my own, initiating something on my own with faith for the first time in multiple years. And so I'd say it was probably the combination of that where I was like, wow, he is speaking right to me. Like that is me. Like I'm wanting to come back after really doing my own thing in reality, most of my life, but for sure my freshman year, just totally doing my own thing. So it's the combination of that word and worship. And I still like service got done. I ran out of there, didn't talk to anybody. I kind of did the sneak in, sneak out thing for like the first 2-3 weeks. Cause I was like, I don't know. I don't like talking to people yet, but it was like what the seed that was planted in my heart. Like when I got home that night, I was like, okay, I got some decisions to make. Like this is real. Like I can't do this like half in, half out Christianity thing anymore. I can't just call myself a Christian and then not even remotely live it or care about it or like value it at all. And so it was kind of like this wake up call for me where I was like, I don't really like doing things like partial. Like I like kind of being all in or all out. And I was like, crap, that means I got to be all in or all out. But yeah.
You said something there, you going there and seeing that, like, I felt like I didn't belong there. And so many times you're right. Like that's a lie from the enemy. Right. Now a freshman's coming in this year and that perception that they believe that for 4 years. So like, what would you say about that? How are you guys helping say, all right, like, how do we love this person, but not overwhelm them at the same time? Like, what does that look like, for that person? That's like, again, what I see is the full truth sometimes, and that's not true. And we're scared to go first. We're scared to let people in. We're scared to be vulnerable. And we're scared to, just like, man, like even talk to someone, So like, what are you seeing that's working? What are you seeing that's not working? What are you, are people like, what are people saying too? So
I think the reality there is, there's a lot of different strategies and things, but you got to be authentic and you've got to be vulnerable. Like I never try to be somebody that I'm not. Like I'm not a big hype guy. I'm kind of just like a steady Eddie. So if I get up there on a Thursday night and just start like yelling or like screaming or like trying to do something crazy, people are gonna be like, oh, like what's going on here? That's not me. And so for me, it's like I'm authentic, but I'm also vulnerable, and I try to be empathetic because first sermon every year, I'll get up there and be like, man, like when I was in your guys' exact seat, whatever it was, I'll do the math, 8 years ago, I was terrified. Felt like I didn't belong. Felt like I was way out of place. So, it's like, you just got to be vulnerable. You got to go first in that. And I think as I've, probably not always done that, perfectly, but done my best to do that well. I'm not trying to put on this face or perception like I've got it all figured out or like I'm perfect. Or even that I'm always like comfortable or confident in myself. It's like, I'm not, but I'm willing to let people into that. And just, be like, man, I was in your same shoes, and it is scary. It is challenging. Like, this is a new place, new environment. You're on this ginormous campus. Most of these kids come from, a town that's a fraction of the size of just this campus, and I think it's really just, if they can see what we found, that is, if they can see that you're authentic and you're willing to be vulnerable and go first in hard conversations, I've seen that this generation is actually very trusting once they know that you're genuine. They're very skeptical until they know that you're genuine, because they don't just take things at face value. Being a pastor doesn't carry the weight that it carried 20 years ago. Yep. If I introduce myself as a pastor, somebody's like, okay, whatever. But if
bummer for you, man.
Yeah, seriously, like it just doesn't carry the weight that it used to. It used to come with like an awe and a reverence and like oh wow, this is a pastor, I should listen to this guy. That's not true anymore, which I actually think is an advantage, because now people just see me as another person, which is exactly what I am, just another person. But once they can see my heart, and they can start to see what drives me, what I value, the way that I do the best that I can to love the Lord and love people, it speaks all the volume that they need. And so I think that, and that's true for everyone in everything, is like, you can't try to be something that you're not. Like, I can't just pretend like I'm good at worship. I'm not. I can't sing. I can't play an instrument. Like, if I got up there, even if I was like doing the best that I could, but was like, fake it till you make it, it would not be making it. It would just be faking it, like there would be no making it. And I think for us, we've found that we just need to be our authentic selves. We need to be who God's made us to be. We don't need to try to be, I don't need to try to be you. I don't need to try to be Lucas. I can be me in the way God's created me to be, with giftings and weaknesses. And that's okay. And that's real life. If all we ever show is our giftedness, which is kind of the social media era we live in, if all we ever show is our giftedness, then people always just think they don't stack up, but it's like, I can tell a story in a sermon about literally yesterday when I didn't stack up, trying to do some project or whatever, just real life, made a mistake. And people can be like, oh wow, like, he's a person too. It's like, I actually love, it's kind of funny. I love when people tell me like, oh, I didn't realize that you were just kind of like a dude, like people have this like, or like they see you like in the wild, like they see like Hornboxers, like, oh, you have a life.
You exist
like,
outside of.
I'm just a person, man, And so I think, that's kind of, I'm just going in circles now, but I think the authenticity and the vulnerability is key.
Yeah. So follow-up question for you on that, Bryce. I'm curious, what would you say to a freshman, like what Lucas was describing, a freshman who's coming in, or maybe they're a sophomore year of school, doesn't really matter, but someone who's coming into the new school year, coming to college, maybe they're lonely and feeling like you were feeling, years ago, where you're like, something's got to change. But they're freaked out about showing up to a community, showing up to a church or a campus ministry. Yeah. What would you say to that person?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is, if you are lonely and looking for community, I firmly believe that the church will always be the best place for you. And so to me, it's, you just got to get, hike up your shorts a little bit, get a little bit uncomfortable, and just try it out. I mean, you can go and try something out. If it's not your thing, like, that's okay. Like, there's no commitment, there's no obligation. You don't need to go to something for the rest of your life if you try it once. But most often I've found that when people are kind of hesitant and on the fence, it's just kind of all the lies in their head that are keeping them. And I'm like, hey, try it for a month. Go to this thing. Even if it's like someone who already knows, like, oh, try this new thing. Try it for 1 month. Try it for 2 weeks. Set a goal and then actually stick to it. Even if you like go home the first time, you're like, nope, never going. It's like, just stick it out. Try it for a month is usually a pretty good amount of time. And I think you'll start to see and realize, once you get to know people, and you start to get a little bit more comfortable, the nerve will kind of fall off, and you'll start to like kind of find your groove.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that advice of saying, do it more than once. If you're going, whether it's a church or a campus ministry, or even like a group of, trying to get to know a group of friends, like try showing up 3-4 times before you make any kind of decision about what it's going to be like. 'Cause anything is going to have some ups and downs, and who knows, maybe the first week you were there, it was a bad week or whatever, or you had a bad week or whatever. And I think that giving it space and time to process is going to be huge for people.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you guys think? Like, what's the biggest piece of advice that you guys would give to put yourself back in the shoes of, going
back when I was young and spry.
You said the church, and so many times we feel like the church is a building, and the church is the body. And I think if we always wait for someone else to go first, nothing's ever going to happen, right? So I think we just have to, we always say in this podcast, go first, whatever that looks like, right? Go first by being the one that's vulnerable, go first. And it's not always going to be perfect. There are people out there that are going to hurt you, but I mean, your ultimate friend is Jesus. If you say I'm a Christian and I'm alone and I'm hurting, that you need to know that, man, he's the one that, again, like Tim Keller says, he's the one that lets you in and never lets you down, right? And never lets you go too. So like, so many times we put our identity, I think sometimes friendship can be a bad thing too, like we make that the identity, we make that the God thing, but everything has to flow from Jesus. We're never created to be alone. We're not supposed to be alone. We're created for community, and we need friends. So like just going first, and whatever that looks like for you, if it's you're already going to somewhere, and you're already going to a group, or you're going to church, now the next action step is just saying hi to someone. Just go first. Don't wait for anyone else. Go first.
Yeah, two things come to my mind. One, we kind of talked a little bit earlier about the idea of identity, like what defines your identity. And this would be this is assuming that this person that we're talking about is a Christian. I'd say get clear about what your identity is, and make sure that you are grounding yourself in that. Practically, that probably looks like, let's go through Scripture and find who does God say I am, and I'm going to preach that to myself. For many years, I had next to my mirror in my bathroom a list of like 20 or 30 things. It's like, here's who God says I am, and I would read through that each morning as just a way to say, okay, I'm not trying to convince myself to believe this, because I already believe it, but sometimes I just needed those reminders of here's what's true, and embed that in your brain till it doesn't escape. So get clear on your identity. And then I would also say, particularly if you're a freshman going into school, or at any stage, get clear about what your end goal is. Like, what are you here to do? Like, are you here to kill it in the way of grades and whatever that thing is? And like you were talking about earlier, I think I would totally agree with you. I think a life that is lived in submission to and partnership with God, and saying, all right, God, who do you want me to be? Where are you calling me to go? You're going to see so much more joy and fulfillment out of that than you would in just setting your own goals. But get in conversation with God, in conversation with people he's put around you who are older and wiser, and get clear about what's my goal? Where am I trying to get by the end of this time? And then work backwards from there. Because so often, man, we live in a present moment kind of world that says, just enjoy where you're at now. Don't think about what's next. And like the future will take care of itself. That's not how life works. Like you can party through college, and then you're going to be playing catch up in some ways, or you can be intentional about how you're living, and that fits from everything to classes, to grades, to developing friendships, to developing relationships. So I think that's hugely helpful. Begin with the end in mind, and then work backwards and say, okay, what do I need to start doing now in order to get to that place that I feel like God is calling me to get to.
I think one more that came to mind too, as I was listening to you guys talk, is finding some sort of like work-life balance, work-life rhythm.
Yeah.
I think it's something that I've actually literally caught myself saying this, and I started to realize like how silly it was that I was continuously saying it. But, I feel like a lot of times you go into college with the mindset of like, okay, college is where you try a lot of different things.
Sure.
And which is true. And I would say lean into that, like lean into the fact that you could have a part-time job for 5 hours and learn a lot, but doesn't have to be forever. Like lean into that. But at the same time, find like how to actually have a healthy lifestyle in rhythm. Because for me in college, I kind of fed into that a little bit too much, where I tried to do so many different things that I created so many bad habits, just like lifestyle habits of not sleeping well, not eating well. I was very relationally connected, but I almost like probably tried to be too relationally connected. Like I realized partway through school that I didn't have like a close circle of friends. I don't know. Like there was just like a variety of like lifestyle, just like overall like figuring out how to be a healthy adult. And I think that's something that we almost like encourage, like, oh, you can figure that out after college. Like just go crazy in college. And it's like, which again, take it with a grain of salt. It's a great season for exploring and learning and growing as a human, but learn those lifestyle things, because any habit that you make, it's always going to be harder to break it later.
Yeah.
And so it took me probably all through my first, really into my second year of interning after I was done with Chi Alpha to feel like I was starting to like have a normal rhythm again, because I was so used to just burning it on both ends that when I was trying to just work a more semblance of like a normal job and, you know, be connected with people, like once I was out of the college rhythm, it was just like like it took me like a year and a half to try to figure out how to just
how
like
do I even do
again.
this?
Yeah. And so just like be intentional with your time, and, you know, it's okay to say no to things. It's okay to, you know, actually sleep. Like it's okay. It's good actually to do that, you know, and, so enjoy college and maximize it for the season of flexibility that it is, but don't lose sight of just like healthy rhythms, healthy lifestyle.
Do you guys think, you know, that's helping? How can we talk to about the other side? The other side, what I mean is like the people that do have life groups, the people that are in community. How can we help that freshman or that someone that's coming in this new school, and how do we invite them? And I know, like, I tell people all the time, you can't have deep friendships with everyone because you're not God. You can't do that. You know, there's few that you need to go deep with, but you can be friendly and be kind to everyone. Or how do I share my friendships well? You know, like, hey, you know, one of the things I like to do is if I meet someone, like, hey, I have a friend you should go get coffee with. You know, I'll just do an intro, text message. But how can we, the ones that do have life groups, how can we help those who don't, I guess?
I think really it's looking at, okay, where has God positioned you and placed you? Like, what's the platform that you have right now? I mean, if you're, you know, a young parent, right, your time is going to be about as minimal as it possibly could be, but you're going to have life experience that no college student does. So maybe it is just, you know, sitting down with coffee every once in a while, or, you know, finding a way to get connected with a college student in the church. If you're a little bit of an older adult, even, like, just don't just assume that you don't have anything to offer because you're not in like the same season, or like, oh, my work schedule. It's like, well, yeah, of course your work schedule is not going to line up. They're a college student, but like find things that God has gifted you with or positioned you in or placed you in that current season. That can be a blessing to people. I mean, I think one of the most valuable things that we see that a lot of college students feel is like, if you get invited over for a meal, like that's like, I mean, you don't even have to make something that nice, like, you know, but they're just used, like they haven't had a home cooked meal that much. They eat in the dining center, they eat at home, they eat rice and beans and ramen, you know, if they're an upperclassman, like they're not used to like a nice home cooked meal like they had when they were at home. And so find ways to become that like family away from home that, you know, for people. And it doesn't have to be extravagant. It doesn't have to be every single week. It doesn't have to be like this something that becomes like the only thing you do with your free time. But even just taking that opportunity to invite that college student over and making them a meal, or asking how they're doing, you know, getting to know them, and almost can be really, I think once we're, you know, kind of like the season of life, like right after college, young adult, you kind of become like older brother, older sister to a lot of college students, where you've gone through everything that they are currently going through from like a school perspective, and, you know, figuring out your faith and just all of those things. So you just have like that little bit of edge on experience, but you're still very relatable. And so it's just so valuable to be connected. But that's true all the way up to, you know, like my grandparents have, you know, tremendous wisdom, and meeting people that are their age. It's almost like you kind of feel like, oh, this is kind of like my grandma or grandpa, you know, like you can utilize every single season of your life to be a blessing to other people. You just have to kind of, you know, discern and pray and ask God, like, God, what is it that you've prepared me? How have you prepared me to be a blessing to these people? Because he's prepared us all to be a blessing to people in different ways through our life experiences and through the things that he's taught us. So
yeah, you saying going to God first is super important. Because one of the things when you do that, it's like, man, I'm not doing this to get noticed. I'm doing this to glorify him, right? When I invite someone over for dinner, I don't care to be noticed. You know, like I really want to love this person. I want to care for this person, and I want to get to know this person. And yeah, I think your posture is super important, why you're doing it. So many times I feel like, even for me, it's like, I've caught myself a couple of times, like, wait a minute, why are you saying yes to all these things? Why are you, for us, we are really, even for this podcast, when people ask us, hey, would you guys want to come speak? We've said a lot more no's than yes, because like, man, like God is telling us to focus here. We're supposed to be doing this now. We're supposed to be getting the podcast out. Like, this is it right now for now. Whatever looks like in the future, we're going to pray through that and we're going to ask him, But if I would have said yes to that, though, if we were to say yes, it's like, yeah, the podcast is going great. Yeah, we want to get noticed, But it's like, man, it's about the one that's hurting, It's like, so, but yeah.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to my mind in that, to your earlier question, Lucas, of how do people who are already maybe have that kind of community built in, I'd say if you show up, we'll just speak to college students, but this applies to any stage of life. If you show up to a place or in your life, you're like, man, I got my group of friends. That means you've got that community, and what you need to do is, I would challenge specifically college students, man. If you're going into the school and you're like, man, I'm stoked to see these friends that I haven't seen since last semester, add to your list, like, I want to find 2 new people this semester and fold them into that group, because I guarantee if you got your group of friends, there are a whole bunch of people out there who are coming in with the exact opposite expectation of like, oh man, I got to go back again. I don't know people. It's gonna be another year alone, but I got to get this degree or whatever, whatever their thought process is. But if you have that group of people, add that to your list and say, can I find 2 people this semester, this year, who we're going to bring into this group. And maybe even if you got a tight group of friends where you hang out regularly, like, have a conversation about that. Be like, guys, can we find a couple people who need friends like we are for each other, and bring them in? And whether that's like a small group in the sense of what I know Chi Alpha is doing, you guys got small groups that are meeting weekly, or it's just an informal group of friends. Either way, that could totally change the trajectory of someone's life.
Yeah, big time.
Bryce, it's been I'm grateful for our friendship. You poured into my life, and just to see your deep love for the Lord and your genuine faith, and it inspires people. It inspired me, for sure. It's like, man, I'm saying I'm a fan of Jesus, but I'm not following Jesus. Like that. Sometimes people rub off the wrong way of that, but man, I'm grateful for that, and I see that from you. And my life changed because, man, you're willing to sit down, have coffee, and just get vulnerable with me. And I got vulnerable with you. So, man, closing this out of like that, there's someone right now that's hurting. There's someone right now that's confused. And specifically for a college student, that's coming into the state of North Dakota or leaving home, let's just say.
Yeah.
Man, like, what would you say to that person? Like, what would you, like, how can you we tell them to go first. Like, what would you say?
I think right now my most recent, I don't know what you would say, like my statement, my thing I've been saying more than anything else recently is we need to cultivate an ear to hear God's voice. And I think that's would be probably my greatest encouragement. And it's not as scary as it sounds. It's not as intimidating as it sounds. It doesn't, it's not like this formula that you got to memorize to do that. But it's as simple as beginning to open your heart to hearing from the Lord. And that's through, God will speak to you through people in your life, close friends, mentors, pastors, teachers. He'll speak to you through his word. He'll speak to you through prayer. And he may, I feel like he kind of, tends to speak to people in different ways, kind of based on your personality. If you're more creative, he might speak to you more through art. If you're more literal, he might speak to you through more numbers. Or, God created you, so he knows how to communicate with you. And it's not God that's not, communicating. It's us that maybe haven't quite learned always how to listen. And so I think my greatest encouragement is no matter where you're at, is just begin to be intentional to learn what God's voice sounds like in your life. Because kind of like you were saying earlier, Ben, like the most valuable thing that we can have in our walks with the Lord and just as people is direction from the Lord, vision from the Lord for our life. Once you know what God's called you to do, a lot of the pressure of this life kind of starts to fade away. And once you have like, you know, kind of a, whether you literally write it out or whether it's just on your heart, like a vision statement, you know, mission statement, like values for your life, however you want to say it, once you know where God's leading you, it gets a lot easier to start to decide what I am and am not going to do. You know, if you know, now that I know that God has called me to college ministry, at least for this season, I'm very confident that God's called me to college ministry. You know, somebody could come to me with this really unique and cool job opportunity, but I don't even have to second guess it because I know that that's not what God's called me to, at least in this season. And that can apply to a whole plethora of different things. But it's the opportunities of this world will inundate us because there will always be opportunities. Always, always, always. There's so many things that all of us could do. I mean, every single person listening to this probably could right now start on like 250 different career paths. Legitimately. Like we could do so many different things, but I found that it's the best to do God's best for your life. The best thing that we can do is to do what God's called us to do, what he's asked us to do. But we aren't going to know that if we're not communing with him. We're not going to know that if we're not spending time with him. We're not going to know that if we aren't slowing down our lives and listening instead of always consuming or, you know, if we're not ever reading our Bible, if we're not ever praying. And that's not like a shame thing. That's just like a reality thing. It's not like you have to set up this, you know, you got to do it for hours upon hours every day. You just got to start to build habits, build consistent habits of being in the Word, praying, fasting, asking the Lord to speak, and then actually sitting and listening and waiting and allowing your ear to be kind of tuned into his voice. Because once you can begin to hear God's voice, and it's not like a start and stop thing always, like sometimes we're going to want to hear God's voice and we won't, and that you just got to navigate that. But once you can begin to get direction and vision from the Lord for your life, I guarantee you your life will change. Everything will change. And you'll be able to kind of quiet the voices in your life, the other voices that aren't all bad, but can't give you the ultimate direction and vision for your life that you need. Those things can quiet, and God's voice can elevate, and you can really begin to find the peace that passes understanding in your life, the confidence, conviction in what God's calling you to do, and you sleep a lot easier at night.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Wow. Why don't you close us out in prayer then, Bryce? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Father, we just thank you. We thank you for this time. We thank you for each and every person that's listening. I ask that you would speak to them in a meaningful way, in a powerful way. God, if there's a question that they have, if there's something that they're wrestling with, if there's a situation that seems unsurmountable in their life, Father, would you show up in that? Would you meet that need? Would you answer that prayer? Would you move in a tangible way? Would every single person that wants to know you but doesn't, or wants to experience you but hasn't, would they experience you right now in this moment? Because your Holy Spirit desires to move and impact our lives in a meaningful way. And so, Father, as we wrap up today, I just pray that you would be with each and every person that's listening, that you would go before them, that you would prepare the way before them today, that you would speak truth and confidence over their life, that they would begin to walk in a confidence of who you are, or continue to walk in a confidence of who you are to them. And Father, would you bless them richly? And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, friends, we love you, and just go first. Peace. Hey, friend, thanks for listening. We're all about equipping you to pursue real friendships. You were not created to be alone, because life is just better with real friends. Let's get started.